All right. Happy Thursday. So I was inspired by the events that started out our meditation this evening. So we had that crystal bowl, and we struck it, and it broke. And I think it had a crack in it for a little while. There's an old saying that my teacher used to use, which is subject to decay are all compound things. But then I was asked, was it expensive? And it's like, no, it wasn't. But also, it's a thing, right? It has Buddha nature. Right? The crystal bowl has Buddha nature in the same way that we have Buddha nature. Right? It changes forms. For a long time it was a bowl that made a beautiful sound. Then it was a bowl that made a horrifying sound. Then it was a bowl in which the bottom fell out. And wow, is that a metaphor for our life? So sometimes you just gotta cook with the ingredients that just pop up, right? And so that thing, that's kind of what we do, right? For a while we make beautiful sounds, then usually we make pretty horrifying sounds. Don't know if you've ever spent any time with someone in hospice, but you'll have the opportunity, if you do that, to deal with aversion. And then we fall silent and take a new form in the same way that our beautiful crystal god has now gone. So one of the ways we can liberate the people around us is by recognizing that they also have no fixed form and are not permanently in a particular state. It's an unbelievably compassionate thing we can do. Because so much of what creates distress in human relationships is wanting someone, not only assuming that a person has a form, but that the form they have is the one I wish for them to have. And so to some degree, human connection and conflict then is based on the idea that when you take forms I prefer, then I form a closer bond with you. And when you take forms that I don't prefer, I am more distant. And if you really are a form I dislike, then I just won't associate with you at all. And of course we can go on down that road even further if you look at human history and see where when people take a form that is despised by others, then all kinds of atrocities happen, and war crimes and genocides. And we can look at the variety, the vast variety of the forms that human beings take, and we can choose the ones that are in, right, and the ones that are out, based on, I need to be a fixed thing, so I'm going to make sure that one thing you always find is when people have a very fixed idea of who they are and they're being very moral and they're excluding a bunch of other people, that almost always, under the surface, the thing they're projecting isn't what they really are, right? There's other things going on behind the scenes. They're screaming about traditional marriage and then they're cheating on their wife, right? Or they're screaming against homosexuality, but then they're actually going on dates with other people of the same gender. So this is a thing that happens all the time because we don't have a fixed form. And since that's the nature of reality, when we refuse to accept that and refuse to conform to it, then what happens is that we fall short of being able to sustain and support that because it's not true, right? I can't make the gong last forever. And in the same way, I can't make the people around me be different than they are. I can't force everyone to be a particular way. And of course, what's hilarious is if you understand the nature of reality and you see people as not fixed and you allow them the freedom, right? Because Buddha says, upon enlightenment, I and all beings are simultaneously enlightened. What does that mean? Well, it means that the Buddha and all other beings all have that Buddha nature, that non-fixed nature. And so we can allow the people around us to be exactly who they are in this moment and not worry about the 17 moments that came before and the 28 moments that come after. Who are they? Right here. It's so powerful. And most folks are walking around in terror of being accepted anyway. I many times sitting up here have talked about some version of, being in a retail situation and there was a mistake that occurs or something like that, and the person's all, but we walk around like hoping that the version of me that has showed up today will be accepted by the people around us. And some of the folks in the Sangha are starting the path toward receiving Jukai, which is agreeing to sort of embrace the Bodhisattva precepts and attempt to live by them. And it's a form of lay ordination. But when we say Bodhisattva, right, we mean a being that forgoes entering into nirvana until everyone else has. So there's a little bit of a metaphysical idea there, right, that I'm going to keep, if you look at more esoteric traditions, I'm going to keep being reborn and being of service until all beings are enlightened, and then nobody has to be reborn. So if you go to certain Buddhist circles, that's how they think of it. But we can enter into the enlightened state. We could just sit, right? We could just sit here and just enjoy being fully in the present moment. Just hang out and meditate. You don't have to help anyone. Right? Let me just take care of myself and meditate and stretch and feel good and live my life, and that's enough. But the Bodhisattva is saying, no, I'm going to get off the cushion and actually be of service to others. And one of the ways we do that is by saying, well, I'm going to look at myself and I'm going to take responsibility for who I am and how I am in the world. So one of the things that came up a few times in Daishan today is the idea of atonement, right? Which is something that we say when we receive Jukai and in other ceremonies. But it's all evil karma ever committed by me since of old, born of my body, mouth, and thought, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance. Now I atone for it all. What's interesting is that some traditions, the approach is, I did incorrect things, and I'm sorry, and I need to be forgiven by an external being who's mad at me because I did the wrong things. But in Zen, what we say is, all mistakes, right, all evil karma ever committed by me since of old, so since before I was born of my body, mouth, and thought, right? So naturally arising out of the fact that I have a body, right? I have a mouth, I have thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts are not the right thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts are defensive thoughts, right? Sometimes my thoughts are aggressive thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts are unhelpful thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts are self-hating thoughts. I have all these thoughts. And the mistakes that I make arise out of them because I'm not in perfect control of all of that. And I have a body, right? Go into a library and I fart really loud, right? We have bodies and thoughts, and we say the wrong thing, even when we don't mean to, because remember that we can say something and then someone else can hear it differently because they're full of all their own karma, their own body, mouth, and thought. So all either evil karma ever committed by me since of old, born of my body, mouth, and thought, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, right? I don't know everything. It's beginningless, right? My ignorance is beginningless. Don't know everything that's going to happen. I don't know the effect of everything that I do. My greed, right? I want stuff. I want things for myself. I want delicious chocolate bars. And I get mad. When things aren't the way I want them to be, I react. Maybe only internally, maybe not. So what are we saying here? We're saying, I'm going to take responsibility for all of my baggage even though it's not my fault. Because there is no me. So how could it be my fault? But yet, even so, I take responsibility for it. I atone for it anyway. Right? It's one of the core things of Jukai is, I'm going to choose to take responsibility for everything within my sphere of influence to the best of my ability in this moment, because that's the way to produce the minimal amount of suffering for me and everyone else. Not because it's the right thing to do, or because I need to go to heaven, or I'm going to go to hell if I don't. No. Because the path to minimal suffering is to take responsibility for everything that you touch. If it's within your sphere, choose to care about it. That's why, when we handle liturgical instruments, we handle them so carefully. Right? which makes it doubly funny because it's funny because you went to do the strike, and your strike was just right, and yet the result was a shattered crystal gong. All evil karma ever committed by me, born of my body, mouth, and thought, right? So by having a body and by doing the correct thing, you created, it's not really evil to break a bell, but, work with the analogy, right? You created evil karma by existing. And that being the case, it changes how we look at everything. It changes how we look at world situations. It changes how we look at each other. It changes how we look at our relationships. It changes how we look at our past, our parents, everything. Because everything is arising out of this formless, beginningless place. And we are this formless, beginningless thing. Sometimes we talk about defensiveness, and I always say, how can you be defensive when there's nothing to defend? It's like, well, because of my body, mouth, and thought, right? I have thought. Like, you said something I didn't like. That's not true. I'm not like that. How dare you? Well, what are we arguing against, right? We're arguing against a creation of you that exists in someone else's mind. How dare you think of me that way? Let me control how you think of me. I have really bad news about that project. I can't even control how I think of me. Right? Thoughts come up, we notice them. Right? So when hurtful, dysfunctional, unhelpful, destructive thoughts about me come up in me, I can notice those. I can let them go. I can atone. I can not identify with them. I certainly can't make it stop happening. And how much more so in others? Have you ever had the experience where you criticize someone about an issue and then they tell you about all of the unrelated good things that they've done? So you say, can you please take the trash out? And they tell you how hard they work at work and how much they, how tired and stressed and busy they are or whatever, right? So, this is a really common thing. Usually it's a defense from, I feel bad that I didn't do the thing that was requested. Hey, I asked you to take the trash out. Do you mind doing that? I work so hard all day. What would happen if you just said, oh, the trash, and did it? How much energy does it take to defend? This is the equation I want people to walk away with, right? It takes an unbelievable amount of energy to defend the fixed self. It takes almost none to just deal with what's right in front of you. And so that's what we come back to, right? We don't know how long our bell will sound good. Right? We don't know. And is it useless just because it's broken? My plan is to take that, chipped bottom piece and glue it back, and then we have a beautiful planter. Right? And then we'll grow something in it. And then we'll use it as an analogy to tell, 10 years from now, there may be a Dharma talk where we point out, hey, look at that planter over there. That used to be a gong. Here's what happened. Here's how that analogy works. Now it becomes a teaching aid. Right? This is the cycle of things. Right? They change form, but they remain enlightened. That's what we do. We change form, but we remain enlightened because we retain that. We retain our Buddha nature despite the fact that we change form. So don't be too hard on yourself. If your current form isn't quite right for you, that's okay. It's perfect and complete right now, and it's on the way to something else. Okay, good.